Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis. Today I'm with Cathal Melinn and Brendan Almack to talk all about PPC, pay-per-click advertising, specifically in Google search. Welcome back to the podcast, both of you. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah, great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, all good, Will. Great to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Both of you have been in really popular episodes, actually, and high value episodes, so no pressure, but I'm looking to get lots more out of you today, particularly about PPC. I have a real natural curiosity in this space because I'm hearing and seeing that things are changing, but I don't think I fully understand it anywhere near as much as you guys. So just to kick us off, as we often do, set the scene, let's frame the conversation. Where are we at with PPC in 2024? What is the sort of state of PPC today, Brendan?
So it's still one of the biggest form of advertising on the planet, a hugely important form of advertising. I would say one of the biggest thing that's happened over the last couple of years is the increase in competition. So when we came out of COVID, what happened was people moved away from online a little bit, but the competition stayed. So demand dropped a little bit, but a huge amount of competition still on PPC. So one of the battles that anyone running PPC campaigns is fighting at the moment is trying to keep their cost per clicks down. If you're in e-commerce, this is particularly challenging. You'll probably be familiar with the likes of Temu. I'm sure your audience have heard of Temu. Not many of them will admit to buying something on it, but lots of people have. They spent about 1.5 billion on PPC ads alone last year, which is unbelievable. So we did a bit of research here in Wolfgang on our e-commerce clients, and we were able to show them that 100% of our e-commerce clients competed with Temu at one stage or another over the course of Q4. So the impact that has when you've got a huge spender like that, it does increase competition, and you have to work even harder to keep your cost per clicks down. So that's been a big change. The other change that I would point to is there's been a little bit of shift in thinking away from something called ROAS, which is return on ad spend. So ROAS it's a metric that PPCers love. If return on ad spend really simply explains is if you spend €1 on PPC advertising and you get €5 in return, your ROAS is 5. That's a KPI that a lot of PPCers have been optimizing for the last couple of years, but there's now a realization that ROAS could in fact be stifling your growth a little bit, and people need to think a little bit outside ROAS if they're looking for new customer acquisition.
Very, very interesting. That's an interesting answer, that. Cathal, what's your take on that?
So, yeah, I mean, I'm totally aligned with that. One of the battles that I'm facing all the time is the continual explanation and almost ownership of the fact that costs have increased outside of our control. And, you and Brendan will attest for this, as a pay-per-click expert, you take ownership of the campaigns you're running. And when costs are kind of spiraling out of control outside of actions that you're taking, like your impact on the accounts, and you're kind of explaining this again and again, that it's Google's proprietary system. They are charging us based on whatever criteria that they have within the mix there. And, we know there's issues in the Department of Justice in the US over this. And you're kind of explaining that. So the cost thing is the biggest factor. And the Wolfgang guys are great because they produce these reports that show us the kind of variances in costs across different markets globally, domestically, and different things like that. Other places like WordStream do it too, Search Engine Land, and we see it everywhere. So it's not like, we have imposter syndrome going, oh my God, I'm doing something wrong here. There's a lot of kind of external stuff happening in the market. Now,
do you feel like you're do you kind of feel like you're defending PPC or defending Google to your clients sometimes?
A little bit, yeah, a little bit. It's like I'm owning the processes of Google, despite it being totally outside my control. It's a weird kind of kind of mindset to be in, but that's how I feel, because for many years, and because like both of us, myself and Brendan, have been around a long time doing this stuff. For many years, you'd put like a couple of €100, a couple of $100 into pay-per-click, and you'd see quite significant returns for that. And it's it feels like it feels to me like that we're getting less value for the investment. So the fundamentals remain the same. Pay-per-click is a utility. People use Google to help them make decisions, to buy things. It's a tool that we use, but that tool has just got a little bit more expensive along with everything else. And that's the biggest front that I'm kind of battling at the minute, definitely. The ROAS thing is an interesting kind of take on a philosophy there. I think that's really good, because metrics can, kind of stifle the brain in the sense that, like, if we don't fall within a certain criteria, we're no longer profitable, we're no longer doing things, and we need to kind of break that mold a little bit. And in the world of kind of higher costs, we need to be a little bit more daring and step outside those KPIs in order to grow within the new world. My final point, if you'll allow me, is I was talking to a digital marketing managing friend of mine who was saying he's really looking forward to next year's forecast, because it's going to be the one forecast in the past number of years that doesn't have pandemic influence in it. All during the pandemic, we were seeing lots and lots of clicks, lots and lots of research happening online, lots and lots of purchases, and it kind of gave us a distorted view of the world. And then last year was like, why aren't we like 2022? Why aren't we like 2023? And next year is actually going to be the first fully washed through pandemic forecast year. So that's something that may kind of change the mindsets upcoming, I suppose.
Yeah. That's a great point that Cathal makes. Like the growth that we experienced in COVID, I've often described growth as like crack cocaine for CFOs. Like once they take a hit in that growth pipe, it's hard to get them off it, even though there's good reasons why you're not having 200% growth the year after COVID. So it is great that we are coming out of that period. I'm a little bit more of an optimist. Like I think that the increased competition forces us to be better digital marketers, okay? And what I mean by that is, I think increased competition forces us to look for ways to find efficiencies within accounts, and it forces us to scrutinize the value that the work we're doing within the paid search account is having. One of the things that a journey we've been on here at Wolfgang is kind of looking less myopically at what's happening within the paid search account and looking more holistically at what's happening within the business. So we try and balance our view of performance, we call it. So we try and balance our view of paid search performance with a more holistic view of the impact that our work is having on the brands. So we're supplementing our PPC KPIs with things like brand searches or brand growth. So just other metrics that show us that actually, although CPCs have increased, the work we're doing is still finding new customers and is still helping your brand grow. So I do feel like it is one of those situations when, when things get a little bit more competitive, it does really push us to do our best work.
It's true that, I mean, look, I get it. Your entire business relies on PPC being worthwhile. So it's always going to look like you are really trying to make the case for PPC because your life depends on it. But that's fair enough, and someone's got to. And I think you're right. I think that's the struggle with all of marketing, is that whatever you do in one place will always have an effect outside of that one place, right? Whether it's, a bus stop ad, an Instagram ad, TV ad, PPC, you will always impact the way that people think about your brand when they're doing other things and they're in other channels. You improve their receptiveness to other channels of advertising. So, and I think I've spotted more brands doing up the funnel PPC, so buying against more informational keywords. I've definitely seen more of that. I don't know if that's just in my bubble of like marketing and tech. Is that true?
You're absolutely right. Like one of the big changes that's happened within paid search is that it has moved up the funnel. I think people are realizing there's only so much to gain by hanging around the bottom of the funnel and capturing those conversions. To be fair to Google, they've understand that opportunity as well, and they've come up with new campaign types within Google Ads that allow us to move a little bit up the funnel. They've got things like Demand Gen, which is specifically designed to allow you to move up the funnel a little bit. But yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's a shift we're seeing too, that people understand that actually, maybe we can tolerate less efficiency or a smaller ROAS, if we genuinely are capturing new customers, if we're finding a new audience, and they're a little bit more confident at making that investment as well further up the funnel because of that.
Yeah. Carl, I'm curious. I know we've talked before about the impact of AI and the various sort of, relying on the algorithm and the automatic settings in Google Ads. Do you think any of that has played a role in the shifts we're talking about? Is the cost going up because we're all getting lazy and not even micromanaging our bidding anymore, for instance?
Well, I think the challenge with AI in Google is a lot of the AI outside of the creative production is kind of black box technology. So we don't really know how things are being decided, and ultimately kind of whose best interest is at heart, to be a bit cynical, and it's sometimes we kind of follow the best practices, and I think this goes back to what Brendan said earlier as well about mindset shifts. There's been a lot of mindset shifts over the past year in terms of things like how we measure things, the best practices we should follow, the ways to kind of do business in the world of paid search and in the world of Google Ads, even within the wider suite. And I remember talking and seeing last year in different conferences and like really top PPC guys around the world saying things like we should be doing things like using lots of broad match and mixing it in with exact match and phrase match and all of that stuff. Now, typically, I'd always kind of separated them out, just because it allows us to ring fence the budget towards.
You mean in different ad groups or campaigns?
Different campaigns. Campaigns. An exact match campaign and a broad match campaign or broad and phrase match campaign or whatever way we split it, because that allows you to ring fence your budget. You say, I want to spend $100 a day on exact match and I want to spend $75 on broad match, or whatever way you decided. You mix them all in together with a $175 budget, and the broad match spends $165, and the exact match, which is the more precise match, gets none of it, because just the way it works. And I'd asked this. I remember asking this at a conference like last year. It was like, should we really be following these best practices? And they were like, yeah, do it. And then it might have been SMX recently, they're saying, no, if you want to separate things out for budget reasons, you should do it. So I think what's after happening is there was a bunch of recommendations around AI, around data density and broad match, and people kind of followed that, and then started to kind of go, actually, this mightn't be the best way. So about half a year ago, for about half a year, I was kind of following this methodology because, first of all, I was reluctant to do it. Asked like a bunch of experts outside in the in conference land and all of that stuff. Should we do it? They say yes. I said, okay, let's give it a go. So I do it for half a year and I'm like, I'm not sure I'm seeing what I want to be seeing here. So I started detangling my setups and restructuring things where I do have exact match campaigns and I do have broader phrase match campaigns, just to ring fence that budget. And that would have been the initial kind of the initial strategy that I would have done like for many, many years. And I'm reverting back to that. To that because it just gives us more control, because the AI may not be working in our best interest, is what I've kind of discovered over the past.
And what about Brendan? Last time we talked, Performance Max was still labelled as being in beta. You think you said you tried it and had quite good results with it, or maybe that you'd heard people, I couldn't quite remember, had good results with it. What do you think about the more automated side of Google Ads? Is it helping, or is it actually leaving us be a bit lazy and actually driving up the price?
So, it depends really on what you want. There is a view where you could automate quite a lot within Google Ads, but you will only get so far. You'll cease to have a competitive advantage at some point, and your results will only be so good. I think we recognize that digital marketing, our human intervention, will add exponential value to your Performance Max campaigns. And I'll give you an example. So when Performance Max first came out, you'd no ability to block brand, right? So what was happening was Performance Max statistics look really good because you are capturing a lot of your brand traffic. There's now an ability to do that because Google have recognized that actually, there is, human intervention here will help performance. And if people want to not just capture their existing customers, they want to capture new customers, they need to be able to not go after their own brand in Performance Max.
And just to be clear for our listeners, by the way, because not everyone knows that term, brand. When we talk about brand or brand searches, we mean people are already Googling the name of your business, basically, which you want to filter out because in a lot of cases you might not want to pay for that. I mean, in some cases you do, but in a lot of cases you don't.
Exactly. Yeah. If you've particularly if you have a large brand, that could take or consume an awful lot of your budget. And as you say, there could be cases where you need to appear for your own brand. You might have a sale on, so you want to indicate that you've got a sale on. But in a lot of cases, you might want to be clear. You might want to separate that into its own campaign, your brand campaign. And with Performance Max, originally you couldn't do that, but now you can exclude brand. So I do think that's a recognition from Google that actually, having digital marketing intervention here will allow people to get better results over the longer term.
Okay, there's Google ads and there's search ads, but there's also display, and there's also these other places that the ads show up, and also YouTube as well. And they're not really that logically related to search ads, and it's almost like they're just there as this will just mop up the rest of your budget and help you spend, make sure you spend as much as possible with Google. And so is that a fair read on it, or actually are those other channels outside of search genuinely useful?
You need to be careful. So you're 100% right. It's a great way to spend an awful lot of money is across the Google ecosystem. But putting some parameters on it. So the fact that you can set an objective, right? So that's the key thing. You're setting an objective around what you want to achieve, and that might be, a target ROAS, it might be a CPA. You're setting some objective that you want to achieve. I think what Google have gotten better at is understanding the connections between each of those channels and understanding the user movements between each of those channels. But managing that objective is kind of key, because you could spend an awful lot of money on the Google Display Network or YouTube. But if you are managing it correctly, it can be a really good part and a really beneficial part of broadening out the scope of who you're actually targeting. And so moving beyond just capturing people on search. I can see why Google needed to do it. They've got an amazing inventory. Huge infantry across YouTube, GDN, Gmail, and some of these platforms are really good in their own right. The fact that now they can join the dots between somebody who searches and somebody on YouTube and somebody on the GDN, it does give them unbelievable context across the user journey. So there are great opportunities for you to show relevant ads to people as they move across the Google ecosystem. But you need to manage that campaign objective.
Yeah, true. And just one more thing from you, Brendan. When we last spoke, you described YouTube ads as a sleeping giant, as I seem to remember, and you were like, most brands are sleeping on YouTube, so therefore none of your competition are probably there, and there's probably quite an opportunity there for a lot of companies. Do you think that's still the case?
I'm very glad I'm not regretting one of these predictions, actually, because that was I think that was 2 years ago. Me 2 years ago was absolutely on the money, and it still is the case. If you look at where the growth is coming from, Google, YouTube is driving unbelievable growth. YouTube, this is my next prediction. YouTube will command more advertising spend than TV within the next couple of years, hands down. I have absolutely no doubt about that. I think it's 35% of YouTube is now watched on a connected TV. YouTube is one of the biggest streaming platforms
It's the biggest streaming platform in the States. It's much bigger than Netflix or anything else. There's some recent research by Nielsen that showed that.
I think I saw it dwarfs Netflix. Netflix looks like a startup next to YouTube. So they've got unbelievable reach. They've got so many hours are uploaded. So content, Netflix had to invest in all this content. YouTube are just getting this content. It's user led. So I still believe that it is a sleeping giant. There's still this beautiful moment in advertising where it's unbelievably cost effective. So it doesn't matter what kind of brand you are, you can appear on somebody's TV and in prime time because they're watching YouTube at home. Like, that's unbelievable. I don't think that's going to exist for a long time. I think there will come a time when large brands recognize the power of YouTube, and what we'll see is like costs starting to go up. Particularly as like linear TV continues to degrade. But right now, as a small brand, you can appear in somebody's living room at a prime time in the evening in front of the whole family.
I mean, anecdotally, I have quite a lot of YouTube on because I've got 2 young sons. Anecdotally, I have noticed the ad breaks on YouTube start to more closely resemble TV ad breaks than 2 or 3 years ago. There are more bigger brands, and because I'm a marketer, I often sit and go, "Oh, right, they're doing YouTube ads now." But still, clearly, it's nowhere near as competitive and saturated as other channels because people are concentrating on social and search, I think. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, Cathal, what do you think about that, about the kind of cross-network effect?
Yeah, so, well, that's actually one of the reasons, obviously, why Google rebranded from AdWords into Google Ads, because AdWords was obviously about search words and the ads associated with search words, but actually the Google Suite is, it's an advertising platform that Google runs, and typically we associate it with search because Google's a search engine, but, it's an ad buying tool. It's really cleverly done in the sense that we're connecting, all the partner sites through the display ads to search to the kind of AI-driven campaigns like demand gen campaigns, and then obviously with Performance Max campaigns.
And do you know what, we have to explain that because I only noticed recently that Discover changed to demand gen in the campaign type. Just for our listeners, Cathal, just explain this demand gen campaign type. So when you go to set up a new Google Ads campaign, you've got options, haven't you? Like a search campaign, a video campaign, and one of them is demand gen. What is it?
Demand gen is, again, it's back up that funnel. So you're meant to put content across Google properties like the home screen on mobile devices, like Gmail. Like it's not quite a Outbrain or Taboola style content platform, but it may mirror that in time. It's very much trying to show like native style ads to people. So native ads are ads that you don't recognize as an ad. So it looks like it's part of the content.
Yeah, they look like suggested stories on an editorial or news site or something like that, don't they?
There's these kind of little animation like options we can put in, and there's a lot of kind of AI powered creative coming out and probably in there at the moment. I haven't done too much demand gen myself because a lot of my budget's still focused on search, but I'm actually rolling out some demand gen for one client of mine who literally said, "We've plateaued," and I said, "Okay, well, we need to start looking elsewhere." And it's just, you hit ceilings and you need to look elsewhere, and you need to kind of stimulate, just poke the beast a little bit from, kind of higher up the funnel to get them moving down. And this is an option I'm going to give a go. Sorry, Brendan was going to come in there.
Sorry, you just reminded me on demand gen. Like, I do think this is Google's play for social media ad spend. I think one of Google's biggest frustrations is that there's an awful lot of money being spent not on Google properties, and sometimes I feel Google peaked when they, on their marketing when they named Google, and after that they just haven't done a great job at advertising their products. But demand gen is effectively, social media advertising. Like YouTube is, I think one of the biggest social media networks out there, and YouTube forms part of the demand gen offering. So I think what they recognize is that there's a lot of money when people think of going up the funnel. They don't think Google, and demand gen is to try and reframe people's thinking to understand, actually, as Cathal said with one of his clients, if they've maxed out on search and they're looking to create demand, they can still do that within Google Ads using something like demand gen. So it's definitely a play for that social media ad spend. It's an interesting name. I think your average marketer doesn't really know what that means. I know very seasoned marketers, they use the phrase demand gen, but a lot don't. I think it's they probably could have found a better name for that.
I think it's because it ties in with search. So search is obviously demand driven. What demand gen is meant to do is generate the demand, which then moves.
So the idea is you're teeing up.
My search is maxed out. let's do some demand gen to stimulate more search. Search has
Got you.
proved its usefulness,
Yeah.
but it does hit ceilings. So we need to kind of stimulate that with this. So it's meant to it's like the backup to search in a way,
Yeah.
and I think that's what they're thinking, and that's how they're trying to kind of position it.
One of the things I've noticed, again, in my courses and workshops and stuff, one of the things that I notice people really overlook in the PPC picture is what happens post-click. And, we know that Google looks at landing pages, and that's part of, how it assesses the quality of your ad campaign. But a lot of people overlook that, and they just dump people on an existing page of their website, whereas really advanced marketers or marketers who know what they're doing are creating these bespoke landing pages and have been doing for years. So how important is that, Cathal, that post-click experience, the landing page, in terms of keeping your conversion rates and your ROI high?
So yeah, I think it's really, really important in the sense that like search, since the dawn of time or the dawn of the internet, is just three things: keywords, ads, and landing pages. What are the questions people are asking Google? What's the response you're going to give? And where are you going to take them to complete the task they started the journey with? Like, that's basically it. Like, there's lots of bells and whistles around it with, extensions and assets and different types of campaigns. But it's basically keywords, ads, and landing pages. So we're focusing in on the keywords and the ads, and we're optimizing to the nth degree in our campaigns. And if we bring them then to a landing page that does not allow the user to fulfill the promise of the original search, we're doing ourselves an injustice. So, like, one of the things I always tell if I'm doing a bit of teaching, what I always tell people is try and create the conditions to allow people take the actions you want them to take. And it goes back to like kind of the philosophy of UX. If you're a travel website, I'm on your website, I want to book a hotel. Okay, I'm on your website and you want me to book a hotel. We both want the exact same thing. But for some reason, brands put these kind of, blocks in the way, and it's, it makes it more difficult for people to take those actions. But ultimately, me as the business and you as the customer, we both want the same thing. We both want the exact same thing. And it's just the landing page is the environment that we control. We don't control the ad auction. We don't control the competition on Google.
True.
We've done the hard work. We've got them to the landing page. Now and also we know if they've looked for. So if we know what they've looked for because we've chosen that keyword, we should be able to infer what should they do next and what do they need to see, read, or do to help them take action. And that's, the kind of basics of it all. And I think you're right. It gets kind of lost in the mix. People kind of just lob them on an old page and kind of, we've got it built. We'll just divert them there without thinking what they need to do on this page, to help them complete the action.
Brendan, how do you deal with that with clients? Because some of your clients will have, obviously, again, will have big established websites, maybe not an appetite to go creating pages. So how do you handle that as part of the mix of a PPC campaign?
Yeah, so I suppose we look at it differently for, say, e-commerce and then lead gen. So for e-commerce, like we're deep linking them, depending on where they are in that search journey. Like if they're a category search, they'll link to a category page. If they're a product search, they'll get deep linked. Things like shopping ads almost look after that first, because they are shopping ads by their nature. They're feed led. So there's
people expect a product page, don't they, on the other side?
100%. So e-commerce, I think, are probably the market leaders in that. If you click on an Adidas shoe, you're arriving on a page that has that exact Adidas shoe, right? For non-e-commerce clients, that's where it gets a little bit more difficult, and I think there needs to be a little bit more thought. I still think there's more work to be done in building out bespoke landing pages. There's some lead gen companies that are really good at it, but there's some lead gen companies that rely on their website. But if you think about it, it's difficult for your website to be all things to all people. So what you need to do is understand how is the user searching? Where are they in the journey? And what information do they need? And what kind of conversion do I expect of them? I think sometimes people try and get too quickly from the click to the customer, but there might be a step in between. You know, if you're a little bit further up the funnel, maybe all you want them to do is sign up to your newsletter, and maybe you've got a really good CRM email campaign, and that will then allow you to capture them as a customer. So I think people need to think a little bit more about where that user is in the journey and what action they need to take and what landing page suits that action. I think we are sometimes guilty of trying to shortcut a few touch points, but if you're making a big purchase, like insurance, for example, it can take you a while to do your research. Or if you're booking a holiday, it can take you a while to do your research as well. So maybe you're not ready to take your credit card out. Maybe you're not ready to become a lead straight away, but maybe you are willing to sign up to a newsletter or sign up to get more information. But building out bespoke landing pages that allow you to capture that conversion and capture the right conversion, particularly in lead gen, is important. I do believe that, you know, we've kind of got it nailed on e-commerce, probably the best at it. But lead gen is where there is more work required there.
Do you think, has there ever been a case for creating a landing page for an e-commerce client that's got perfectly good product pages?
What do you mean?
Well, like, let's say I'm selling shoes. I'm not maybe Adidas, but I'm selling shoes. I've got a great e-commerce website. It's built on Shopify, works beautifully, got lovely product pages. Is there ever a case for me actually creating a landing page as the endpoint for an ad, or is it just always click through to the product page and keep it simple?
Like, it depends what the search is. So in that example, if they're searching for a particular item, it was straight through to the product page. Like, people have been conditioned. It's like the Amazonification of Google. Like, once people see the product, their expectation is they'll arrive on that product, they'll see the reviews, they'll see the price. I think one of the things that there's an opportunity for is in inventory management, right? And this is where it gets a little bit nerdy, right? So you think about, we'll take the example of the shoe. One thing that we're noticing is a way to improve the conversion rate in those landing pages is to start to look at what inventory we have on that product, right? So for example, you know, let's say if you only have a size 12, you know, and you only have a size 4, there's only a certain percentage of the population that are those shoe sizes. And if they're the only size you have in stock, already you're saying there's a large amount of people are going to land on this landing page and not convert because we just don't have all the sizes. So you can manage your inventory to make sure, actually, we need to make sure we're covered across a certain amount of shoe sizes before we'll start showing ads and getting people to this landing page. So it's almost trying to increase your chances of capturing that conversion by just linking your inventory to the ads that you're willing to show.
Interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. That's just so you're basically not wasting money on clicks that don't convert.
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't stand there if you were a shoe shop and you only had one size. You wouldn't stand outside trying to get everybody in because you know that, like, the chance of somebody walking in who's a size 12 is going to be pretty slim. You'd wait till you were restocked and then you'd start advertising to increase your chances of making those sales.
Yeah. Okay. Right. I get that. That's interesting. Another thing I wanted to ask you guys about is something I've come across, a problem I've come across, and actually recently, is the thing about buying against really niche keywords. So it seems that the problem is that when you've got a very niche product or service, like a lot of people have, you know, well, most of us aren't selling something universal like shoes. We're a law firm in, you know, Cork or something like that. We've got very specific types of searches we're trying to capture. And you've got one of two problems. You basically are getting no clicks because it's too niche, and you're having to have exact match keywords because the alternative is to not have exact match keywords, and then you're just getting all kinds of clicks from people who are, like, let's say if you're a law firm, people who are legal students, people who are doing just random bits of research about the law in Ireland and stuff like that. And it seems it's either kind of feast or famine in terms of the clicks. How do you deal with that? Cathal, what's your kind of take on that?
Well, it's always the way. Like, I mean, there's always going to be a portion of keywords that you know that just drive no traffic or whatever, you know. So, like, it's definitely a case by case basis, you know. Like, ultimately, search might not be the answer in this particular environment. If we can't get searches, we can't get searches, or we don't have the ad rank because they're tiny keywords and Google just didn't even recognize them. more of a content strategy, or indeed moving towards kind of the top of funnel stuff is probably a better way to do it. And then maybe you can stimulate the demand at the bottom of the funnel. But I mean, sometimes search isn't the answer. You know, even though we want it to be, sometimes things are just too niche. And, you know, we can do some keyword research. We can do some kind of, you know, matching with broad match, or you know, kind of open it up a little bit. But you do get that kind of lack of quality. So while impressions and clicks might go up, the number of quality impressions or clicks probably won't, increase in tandem. So I think you have, at that point, you have to ask, is search the answer? And it's not necessarily a cop out. It's just, you know, if you're, you know, a Fabergé egg producer in, the East Midlands or something like that, like, you know, you may not just have that market there. But if you show ads on other channels, or diversify your channel mix outside of search, it may stimulate it in time, you know. True. And maybe the job actually is, we're not ready for search right now because the market hasn't been developed enough, and we need to develop the market, because ultimately what search does, it's the Teddy Sheringham of marketing. It stands on the goal line and it pops the ball in. You know, it is there sweeping up the demand that exists in the market. But if there is no kind of latent demand in the market, search is less effective. So we do need to create that demand in that sense. Maybe that's the strategy to take at that point.
Great 90s English football reference there, Cathal. Certain section of our audience definitely get that. But I know what you mean. It's search is the striker on the goal line waiting to, but without that up the funnel demand gen. Right, okay, that's interesting. What's your take on that, Brendan? Do you ever get that problem with any of your clients, that it's quite niche?
Yeah, like weirdly, we do this thing in Wolfgang where we call it a Learning Thursday. So it's actually happening now. So from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, the whole team are downstairs and we'll present a case study or some of the best work. Last week we had a great case study of an Irish brand, and they're quite a niche offering, and they struggled with exactly this. You know, they've got this great product, but there's just not much search volume for that particular keyword. So the tactic that we took is, like, we had a conversation with them and we worked with them on trying to build demand for their own brand, right? So rather than trying to get people to search for that niche keyword, we wanted to get people to search for the client's brand name. And I think this is a little bit of a shift in mindset for digital marketers, particularly paid search marketers. Is, you know, one of the criticism of digital when I started my career, and probably when Cathal started his career as well, is that you can't build a brand on digital. But that's completely been debunked. You can absolutely build a brand on digital. You can build a brand on digital alone. You can build a brand using paid search and YouTube if you want. Like, look how Temu built their brand. Like, they built it literally by just buying as many PPC ads as they could and hammering YouTube. That's how they built it. So I do think that when you are working in a niche category, but you've got a great brand and a great product, I think you need to be confident as the business owner to start to build your brand, you know, and not rely on people searching for that niche keyword. You don't want to necessarily drum up search interest for your competitors, but get them searching for your brand, because the reality is it's going to be a cheaper click, and that's going to have a longer lasting impact on you as well. And bear in mind that if you're niche, not everyone's going to be ready to buy from you now. So focusing on trying to generate interest in the niche keyword mightn't serve you that well, but if you focus on driving interest for your brand, when they are ready to buy, maybe they're going to remember you, and maybe they'll come back looking for your brand.
How did you drive that interest in their brand?
Yeah, so this is the great thing. Like, these weren't even big budgets, so it's not like we did this massive campaign. We used YouTube, so we convinced them to spend some time, or spend some of their budget, and find some additional budgets to run some YouTube ads across particular categories that we knew would be interested, like audiences that would be interested in the product. And then we measured that for them as well, right? So we kind of went a step further, and this is what I was talking about earlier on about expanding our view and performance. We started to measure their brand searches, so you can do that within Google Ads. You can literally see how many people are searching for the brand, and we could demonstrate to them, now that we've run these YouTube campaigns for a number of months, there are more people searching for your brand. And this is brilliant, because They can go back to the business, they can go to the CFO, and it's often difficult to pitch for a brand building budget on digital. But if you can show the CFO that actually there's more people looking for a brand now, and these are cheap clicks, and they've got a higher propensity to convert than any other traffic. The business gets more confidence in starting to build that brand, and they understand that this isn't, brands and performance, that these things are intrinsically linked, and we need to ensure that we've got a marketing budget that is trying to build our brand in the long term, and then also we've got a really efficient paid search campaign that's capturing that demand.
It's interesting that you use the word marketing budget, because remember years ago it was called the digital marketing budget.
Yeah.
But now it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. Well, I think we're getting towards 70% of global advertising spend is going online, and that's going to increase as well. So I'd be confident enough to say that when we're talking about marketing, we're talking about digital. It's the most important. They are the most important channels in marketing on the planet right now, and digital marketers are the most important marketeers on the planet right now as well.
Thank you. Yes, we are.
Welcome.
Makes us feel good. So, Brendan, talk to me about measurement. What is best practice when we're actually measuring and reporting on PPC campaigns?
So measurement is probably one of the biggest challenges faced by marketeers at the moment. It's one of the aspects of digital that I think has gone backwards. I think if you say Google Analytics 4 to everyone, you'll see them visibly cringe a little bit, you can see the anxiety build up in them. I think what's happened is some of the cookie deprecation and privacy has sent measurement backwards in some respects, and that it used to be very easy. Universal analytics that told us the truth, and we could rely on it. Since Google Analytics 4, we have to work a lot harder to find what that truth is, and we're finding that we're needing to supplement our view of Google Analytics 4 with other views, and they might be back-end views from Shopify, for example, to really understand what's driving conversion for us. One of the things that I'm hopeful for, though, is at Wolfgang, we've started to work with our clients on measuring impact over the longer term, right? So instead of being shackled to performance through a monthly report, sometimes we haven't done ourselves any favors that we really look myopically at performance on the last week or the last month. If you can extend your view on performance and start to look at performance over, say, 6 months or a year, you can start to supplement it with metrics that actually are more important. So how many new customers have we added? How many people are looking for our brand? Or what does our share of search look like, for example? So these are really important metrics. So I do think as marketeers, the fact that Google Analytics 4 is so clunky, we will start to look outside it, and we'll start to look at metrics that are actually more important. Google Marketing Live was on recently, actually, and Google announced something that I'm excited about, because you've probably heard of marketing mix modeling. And anyone that's looked at marketing mix modeling will be blown away by how arduous it is and how expensive it is. And it's just not accessible to 90% of brands. It's so expensive.
Just explain what that is for our listeners.
So marketing mix modeling is it's like qualitative research, statistical analysis to try and understand what of your marketing investments has had the biggest impact on your marketing outcomes. So really basically, and I'm butchering this explanation, but they look at the cost inputs and the channels that you've used, and they look at your sales then at a top level, and they're able to do statistical analysis to try and work out which of those channels and which of those investments has had the biggest impact. So the idea is that you should end up with a report saying that actually your best investments is, say, YouTube, for example, because you're getting the best return from that. But it takes a long time, and it needs a large amount of data. Typically they'd look at 12 months worth of data so they can normalize sale periods and seasonal fluctuations. So a huge body of work, and typically you get the report 6 months after you've commissioned it. So, as I said, not accessible to most brands out there, but Google have a solution called Meridian that they're going to open up as an open source tool that will allow people to start to experiment with marketing mix modeling solutions. My hope is that Google will understand actually it's very much in their interests to start to provide some kind of marketing mix modeling solution, because anytime any of our clients have invested in MMM, Google are up there. They're up there as a safe bet in terms of investment. So I do think that as marketeers, although Google Analytics 4 is very clunky at the moment, I think what we'll do is we'll become a little bit broader in terms of how we look at performance. We'll get closer to the business, and we'll also think a little bit longer term around the impact that our marketing is having on brands.
I'm glad to hear that, because look, it's not just search ads, it's all kinds of digital marketing. There's always been this idea that you spend money today and it generates revenue by tea time. And, whatever the channel, whether it's organic, paid, email, but clearly that's not the case. We know that to get someone to start thinking about us and then actually buy from us can take months and years, can't it?
Exactly.
That's music to my ears. Yeah. Also, just thinking about how things are changing out there. Cathal, you've always got interesting point of view on the actual product itself, like the interface of Google, and that's changing over time. There's more kind of tweaks and AI features and things like that, and recommendations and ad optimization scores or whatever. What do you think about all of that?
We're in this like massive change period. So just as Brendan like alluded to there, like GA4 is still, it's almost like a advanced beta. It's not quite fully baked yet. Google Ads has been around a long time, and it's very good at what it does, which is allow you to show ads and ultimately make money for Google. So with the advent of AI, there's a lot of kind of talk and chatter about AI. And what we've noticed over the past number of years with the Google interface is there's lots of warnings when you do things.
Yeah.
Oh, you might not want to change that. That could lead to lower conversions.
It's relentless.
You might not want to do that.
Yeah.
And it gives you this kind of doubt. This PPC specialist over in the States, Amy Hebden, I love her. I love her. She's the CEO of Pay-Per-Click Magic, I think they're called. But she pointed this out, that like the interface is actually designed to make you do what Google feels is the best practice. So limited by budget. Oh, better spend a bit more. Changing the bidding strategy. Oh, you better be careful there.
And there's like an apply all button as well, isn't there? Where you can just, it's one click and just apply all recommendations, including
and then you
raising
get your
your budget.
optimization score of 100%. But also, if you just press dismiss, it just goes up as well. If you literally just dismiss all of those, you end up with a score of 100%. So if you press apply, which is obviously the blue button, and as all of us know, as conversion-focused marketers, if you make a button a different color from the background, you're more likely to click it. So if you click the apply button, you get the higher score. But if you click the not-so-obvious button, which is dismiss, you also get that score.
Interesting.
So like the interface, this is really for the listeners who are starting out, is the interface gives you lots and lots of warnings, and it's just important to take them with a pinch of salt, because it's like, honestly, I still have some campaigns that I've decided fairly recently to run on manual CPC, and I hadn't been running on manual CPC, but you can get a higher impression share with manual CPC and a lower cost per click than some of the automated bidding strategies. So I do it on only exact match campaigns, and I do it only with, kind of ones that I've kind of experimented with and stuff like that. But when you're changing it from max conversions, max clicks, or target CPA, or any of the AI driven bid strategies to a manual CPC, it goes, oh, be careful, this could lead to lower conversions, which is true. It certainly can if you've got a very kind of conversion focused campaign. But for your brand keywords might be fine on manual CPC. Like they really might, because they're fairly low cost per click, and you can be efficient there. Now what I find with manual CPC actually is, I know we're going on a bit of a tangent, is that
that's good.
It works quite well when you do the initial shift, and then it starts to get less effective after a couple of weeks. So after a couple of weeks, I might flip it back for a week or two to an automated bidding strategy, and then flip it back again, and it comes back down. So it's kind of like you're hacking the system a little bit.
Wow,
you're messing with its inputs, you're messing with its signals.
That's interesting. I mean, and in the time we've got, just give me any other quick tips. And we've only got a few minutes, but just give me a couple of other quick tips for people starting out that might not be so obvious.
Right.
Things, settings to change, things to try.
Two main settings to change. The default option for location targeting is people who are interested in or in your physical location. That is the default option. So if you're targeting the UK, It's people who are in the UK and people who are kind of interested in the UK or on the UK version of Google. That is the default option. That means that you're not targeting the UK, you're targeting a much bigger market. So obviously the most important location setting is people who are regularly in your target location. That's the first tip. Cool. I'd say. The other one is it's a ChatGPT tip that I shared on LinkedIn a while back. So unless you are promoting free versions of a product, you always want to add the negative keyword free to your campaign, so people aren't looking up free versions of your product. Google's kind of matching different language searches. So if you're like, say for example, targeting campaigns across Europe, if people search in Spanish for your English keyword, Google will still probably match that. But I recently put into ChatGPT, give me a list of all keywords in European, or give me a list of the word, no, what did I say?
The word free in all European languages, basically. That's what it was.
I said, give me free in all European languages in relation to cost. And it gave me a list of all the different languages, Greek, Polish, Italian, all that stuff. So you can just add that word free as a negative keyword on phrase match to your campaigns across Europe. And it means that while you're kind of negating any free searches in English, you'll also mean that if Google decides to translate it, you get that too.
That's good. I like that. Thank you. Brendan, have you got a few tips for people starting out, or a few things to try, settings to change?
I think the biggest mistake that we see is incorrect conversion tracking setup. And it can throw everything out of kilt. So setting up your conversion tracking, validating that it's working, and making sure that you're tracking the right conversion and not tracking multiple conversions is absolutely key. If you think about how a lot of the campaigns work now, they're basing their decisions off that conversion tracking. You're making decisions around that conversion tracking. Your view of performance is around that conversion tracking. We've seen instances where people have been triple counting conversions, for example, or tracking the wrong conversion. And it just means that any decision made after that by you or by the Google algorithm is going to be based on incorrect data.
Because when you set up a new campaign, it suggests several goals, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And you're saying strip that back, just have the one goal that you're interested in for the campaign.
Have the one goal, have the one focus within that campaign, Because otherwise what happens is if you have, say you have a soft goal in there, which might be like hitting the cart, and then you have a conversion. As far as Google is concerned, like 2 conversions have happened there, and then it will start to find people most likely to do that again. Whereas actually what you're saying to Google is only find people most likely to actually buy something and put their hand in their pocket.
That's a great tip. Good stuff. Thank you for that. Well, guys, thanks very much for your time. That has been really interesting. I could talk to you about this stuff for hours because clearly we've opened a bit of a box there and there's a lot in there, I think. But yeah, thank you very much. Just remind our listeners before you go where they can connect with you and find you online. Brendan?
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Brendan Almack, and my email address is brendan@wolfgangdigital.com as well, or you can sign up for the Wolfgang Digital newsletter on wolfgangdigital.com.
We will, and like Cathal says, you do some quite useful reports, which are always worth tuning in for, right, Cathal?
Yeah.
Cathal, where can people find and connect with you?
Same as Brendan. I'm on LinkedIn, so Cathal Melinn, search me on LinkedIn. That's easily the best place to find me. And then digital-basics.com is my little consultancy that I have with me and my dog. So if you see a website with a dog and a piano, that's me.
Good stuff. Right, guys, thanks very much. Appreciate your time. Hope to chat to you again soon.
Thanks a million, Will. Take care.